I'm Suzi Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well. So, Martin, how I do this is I don't pretend I've organized all this. I don't pretend that we sat down and did this whole agenda and practiced and all like that. I just meet people like you. I'm an explorer and I go out and I find people and people that are disruptors and they want to know. So I say there's two kinds of people in the world, and you just described yourself. There's people who don't want to know. They don't search out. They already think they already know, and they're very resistant to anything new. That's just the way I do it, people, I call them. And then there's a whole bunch of people, thank goodness, like you that want to know. You just described going on LinkedIn and how important it was because you are meeting people that you wouldn't normally meet and talk to in what would you said your social media circles. And I sought you out. I saw your videos with your little boy. So I actually got excited about you as a father first. Then I went back and saw that we had someone in common, someone who is a disruptor, a really professional disruptor. Like he's shaken up the whole mental health world like Gabor Mate does, Dr. Gabor Mate. And if you don't know him, like check him out. He's next. And I just wanted you to know that that was exciting for me too, that I do the same thing. I'm searching out people that are going to help me, even at my age, to want to know differently and be different and keep changing. So I thank you for that. So everybody meet Martin Ali Sims. And I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then who we have in common, why you followed him, why you got interested in all this, because this is about you, Martin. This isn't about me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you for having me on. I appreciate you for seeking me out. And funny thing is, like the videos with my son, his name is Genesis, and I'll tell you why that's important in a second. So, well, I can tell you now. I didn't start with mental health in a way where I was engaged in it. I always thought that it was important, but I never was engaged in it until my wife was pregnant with Genesis. And as we were going through the early parts of pregnancy for her, well, really 2 days after I found out she was pregnant with him, I tore my ACL at a basketball game. So like the whole pregnancy, I had a torn ACL and a pregnant wife. So like that was not the ideal circumstances to be preparing for a baby. And I also didn't have the surgery because it didn't make sense for both of us to be walking around wobbling and crippled. So I ended up having to, not have my surgery immediately. But that took away what would be one of my most regulating activities, which was basketball. I love to play basketball. Basketball always was something that would take me away from whatever stressors that was going on in life. And so from that point, we had a discussion, and she said, "What do you want to do before the baby gets here? This is gonna go pretty fast." And I suggested that we got therapy. Like I was like, "Hey, look, my we both know."
Crib. You didn't say Lamont. You just said, let's go get. I just have to say that's unusual.
It is, but like I didn't feel like basketball was my therapy. Basketball was my therapy. So if I needed to get something off my chest, or if there were things that I needed to process, I could go feel better and play. I can go play basketball, feel better, process it in a much, much better way. And then when I no longer had that, having to process things while I was injured, dealing with a devastating injury like a torn ACL, knowing I have a baby on the way, there was a lot more stressors than I knew how to deal with at the time. And backstory, that was the year I turned 33. I was being triggered in ways that I hadn't been triggered before because my neighbor died at my house when he was 33. And so and I was 14. I was 14 at the time when that happened. And so we were playing basketball. We played 2 games and he had a heart attack and died. And so those types of things were coming up during my year of being 33. I was being triggered before my birthday. And I'm saying these words and I didn't even have any context for them at the time. I just knew that they were things that I was dealing with. And so when I started therapy with my wife, these things started to come up immediately in the therapy sessions. And so she started explaining to me what disassociation was and how I would handle certain things like that, certain conversations with me and my wife, or certain just, I would say, contentious moments. Sometimes we don't argue, but like there would be like points of contention, and then there would be this disassociative behavior that I didn't even know what the word was. I had no idea what it was. I called myself nonchalant or not, getting involved with
I'm
that.
just chilling. I'm spacing out.
Yeah, yeah. And so she was like, no, your past experiences, your childhood experiences could be causing you to disassociate in some of these overwhelming moments for you. And that didn't make sense to me. That literally didn't, I hated the word disassociation. And there's some issues as to why. So first and foremost, some of these situations in which I was disassociating in were probably situations that as a responsible adult should be engaged with. You know what I'm saying? But I was disassociating in them, and that was causing some things between my wife and I. And so then I'm trying to understand, because the way she explained it to me, she said disassociation causes your brain to check out automatically due to a past trauma or some traumatic experiences. And I'm like, yeah.
Protect you.
So you're telling me that I'm in trouble for something that my brain is doing automatically, and it's making me not pay attention to things that I should be paying attention to, but it's because of something that happened as a child. What is the remedy for that? Like, personally, like what do I do in a situation in which something overwhelming triggers me into a space of not being present for it? Like, how do I stay present? And so that's when she came across Dr. Perry's The Boy That Was Raised as a Dog book. So somewhere she found that book during our session. So she didn't find that book before it. So she started reading it, and there was it's a crazy story. I'm coming in from training one of my personal training clients, and the therapist and my wife are on the phone with each other without me. This doesn't feel fair either. And so I get in the house and they're like, "Oh, I'm talking to Tara and we're having a conversation," and I'm like, "But I'm not a part of it." So she's like, "No, no, 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 no. We're talking about you," and I'm like, "That doesn't make me feel better either."
That's
Right.
worse.
I'm like, "So what y'all talking about?" She was like, "Well, she's saying that she's reading this book, and the book reminds her of you and all of the dissociative stuff, and she's reading this book by Dr. Perry, and he's explaining it like perfectly, and you should read the book." And I'm like, "Okay. So the book reminds you of me. What's the name of the book?" And she's like, "The Boy That Was Raised as a Dog."
What? Wait. Time out, right? Whoa.
What are you trying to say?
Call me a dog?
Right.
Well, actually, some people call dog. I know some very famous people call dog, and they love it.
Yeah, man, but I am extremely dysregulated even in this moment while they're talking. And, they both were apologetic about it, and they were definitely had the best of intentions. It just didn't go well, and I started researching Dr. Perry while they were still on the phone, like while we were talking, and
Dr. Bruce Perry for everybody.
Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Bruce Perry,
Perry. Everybody, write that down right now.
yeah, absolutely. That's my guy. I love him. That's my guy. So anyway, so I look up maybe one of his YouTube videos or something like that. So by the time they got off the phone, and by the time I looked at maybe like 2 minutes of his YouTube video, I'm like, no, this is it. Like this guy gets it. I'm understanding. I can tell like his whole outlook on things, and I've pretty much been studying the neurosequential model ever since because it did help me understand disassociation for myself. It helped me understand like different parts of the brain and how the brain develops and how it organizes, how it processes things, how it engages. And so I delved into it immediately personally. And so that started to bleed into everything else that I was doing. I was already personal training. I started adding it into personal training things. I was already coaching the youth basketball team. So all the things that I started learning from the neurosequential model and Dr. Bruce Perry's work, I started implementing everything that was working for me with the boys that I was training. I mean, boys that I was coaching in basketball at the time, with my training clients, with my wife, with my son, my older one, and then, of course, with her while she was pregnant, I'm understanding the neurosequential model is basically like it's just a sequence. Like this is the developmental sequence that we need to be present like this. And then when the baby was born, it was the same thing. I could completely be intentional about everything that we was doing with him from day one, and even prior to day one, because I found out all this while she was pregnant. So like knowing how to keep the environment safe and comforting for her, so the baby could develop properly, so she doesn't, pass, a lot of stress hormones to the baby, and all those types of things. And then, of course, once he's born, he's been here for 3 years now, and it's just been great. Everything just keeps growing from it. I've been able to get certified in the neurosequential model for sport. Now I'm actually on the staff for the neurosequential model for sport. I mentor coaches, everybody that's coming to get the certification, because it's like I'm like an evangelist for the neurosequential model at this point. And
it's a shame, Martin, that you're not excited about this. It's
a
shame that you're just like intellectually engaged in this neurosequential model. So here's what I need, because I'm not certified in it. I've read What Happened to You, question mark, like it's
sure.
I should go get it because it's filled with yellow marker and little post-it notes and everything. And like you, I instantly got it. It was like somebody finally spoke to me about what happened to me, how it affected me, and then what I could do to literally help mitigate and manage. I can't go back and change what happened to me. I can, though, start to do things that help change me, help me heal, help me manage, help me change. And that was everything to me. And so I need you to explain, is because now you've got this certification that I'm in awe of. I'm so happy. The name of this podcast is Be Crazy Well. It should be Crazy Well using the neurosequential model. That's all you'll get, because you keep calling everybody and say, you can be crazy well. I'm just not quite sure how to get you there. So anyway, can you share what you think are the basis or the biggest moments of this model, how you use it, and how it's helped you and the people you train and work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I explain it in a very dope way. Okay, so it's dope is an acronym in this sense. So your brain is dope. Okay, so it develops, organizes, processes, and engages in a sequential manner. Sequence meaning order. So we use, and your brain is dope. Okay, it's dope. If it develops, organizes, processes, and engages in a healthy way, in a safe environment, then it remains dope. Now, what makes the brain not as dope is chronic stress and trauma. All the traumas that you can name, whether it be developmental trauma, childhood trauma, acute trauma, complex traumas, all these things create it really makes the brain not as dope. So it affects the development, it affects the organization, it affects the processing of the brain, it affects the engagement and how we should engage with a traumatized brain. And then, I also go into it and I say, like, what makes the brain doper after trauma or chronic stress? Well, the R is for regulation. And so if we can regulate regularly, then we can start to heal the brain. And regulate, I mean the brain. I'm also talking about the nervous system, which is an extension of the brain and the whole nervous system part. So we basically use somatic exercises in sports, and we use a lot of relational tactics and strategies to make sure it's a safe environment based on what we know about the neurosequential model, based on first regulating people, then relating to them, and then trying to reason with them and explain whatever the neurosciencey
Say that
things
again.
are.
Say that, those 3 R's again. Do that
It's
again.
regulate, relate, reason.
Okay. And let me ask you just a quick question before we go on. So regulate, much like in a car, in a house, there's all kinds of regulators in the environment and in the mechanical world.
Mhm.
Like we literally regulate how much water comes into the house from the street. There's a regulator out there on my sidewalk so that not too much water comes in and blows my pipes up and everything like that. There's a regulators in cars. So you're talking about something that what you first do, and you use the word somatic. Explain to people what somatic means and how that is the first step to regulating, because you were doing that with basketball and not even knowing it.
Thanks. So somatic just means of the body. That's what it means. That's the definition. But a lot of times, when we talk about therapy, most people think talk therapy, and the fact of the matter is, when we had a traumatic experience or chronic stress, it's a whole body experience. It's not just our brains. It's not just in our heads. Our body is what also registers these traumatic experiences and these stressors, and it's a whole body experience. And so when we look at somatic exercises, we're looking at processing the traumas or the stressors from a whole body experience, so to speak. So that may mean having to ground ourselves. So when I disassociate, I might need to get myself back by, some people do tapping, some people do different things with their body, some people do breathing and things of that nature, walking around barefoot, various exercises that can make you feel present in your body and not dissociate. You know what I'm saying? That's what I was doing for the most part. But when we talk about basketball, basketball has this very rhythmic routine, dribbling a basketball. You're always touching it with this, and there's a relational aspect of playing basketball too, where it's a competition, but it's competitive and camaraderie, and then there's the thing with the team, and it's you constantly get positive reinforcement. You got constant rewards in basketball, so to speak. And this also works in the gym, where you doing sets and reps and things of that nature. So like, these are inherently somatic things anyway, because you have to have the body involved.
Bilateral. They're bilateral. You're using both sides of your body, and there's
It's,
rules and regulations and boundaries.
yeah,
It literally keeps you in what's called a safe space. And if you go outside that boundary, it's not safe. You got to start over again. I mean, that's a part of regulation too, right? This idea that, like, no, I can't go outside and shoot from outside the boundary line and let that count. So I love that part of sports too, is that it literally could, no, we can't do that. So how many families could benefit from that? Like, no, we're not allowed. I said to my grandson once, when he was really little, I said, okay, now that you're older and you're going to a nurse's school, our family doesn't say the S word. And he goes, you mean, he goes, looks like this. He goes, you mean shit? And I go, no, 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 we can say shit. We can't say stupid. Stupid is a hurtful word. That's
right.
boundaries. Shit's fine, but stupid is not okay. So that, to me, is what you're talking about too, this ability to regulate with boundaries. Keep going. So now you're finding out things that you can go through the body to the brain, as opposed to from the brain to the body. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Because I mean, it's what's called afferent neurons or afferent nerves. Basically, it's bottom up. the neurosequential model also speaks of bottom-up processing. If we just talking brain, we're talking about the bottom parts of the brain going to the top parts is how we process. That's the sequential, that's the sequence in which it goes. So we process inner information and outer information through our five senses, bottom to top. And so the bottom part of the brain, that's our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, all those F's that we respond to in that way. That's in the bottom part of our brain. I try to explain it to people like this. So the same parts of your brain that regulate your temperature that you don't wake up and think about, that regulates your your temperature, your heartbeat, something that you don't turn on and turn off. These things regulate the parts of your body that you don't have an actual say so in. And thank God you don't, because if you ever forgot to turn your heart on, you know what I mean? If you ever forgot to regulate your temperature, these are the survival mechanisms that don't ask us for permission to regulate it, to keep us regulated. And so our trauma responses are also in that part of the brain that we don't get a chance to think about. We automatically do it, just like our heart automatically breathe, our breathing is automatically going. We don't have as much of a say so in these functionalities, and neither do we have that like that thought process of saying like, hey, I'm going to respond to this from a traumatic perspective. That we don't do that. And so this is our most survival part of our brain. So its job is to keep us alive. So it's hypervigilant. And so when we talk about the neurosequential model or just the sequence, this is the part of our brain that is there to protect us, and it's not going to ask any other part of the brain, is it okay to protect us? It's just going to do what it needs to do to protect us. Now, how we have to protect our brain stem, which is that part of the bottom part of the brain, is to start providing it other experiences that lets it know that we are not in danger when we're out of these traumatic experiences, and that takes time. Takes repetition. It takes, being in safe environments and understanding what safe environments are, what they feel like, and remembering those, because memory isn't just conscious memory of what we can recall. Our bodies remember everything too. And so when it remembers those things, it's like, hey, look, we've been in this situation, or we've been something similar. It felt very traumatic at the time. We're going to protect from that. And so that's great when it's a situation in which we need to be protected from, but then it's also not so great when we are in spaces where we're safe. And generally, this is where the term self-sabotage comes from. But oftentimes, self-sabotage at some point was self-protection. It's just we're no longer in that space anymore. And now we're in safer spaces, or spaces where that isn't appropriate for the space. And so once we start understanding that about ourselves and about new environments that we're in that don't put us in such a endangered space, even though our bodies are trying to protect us, and it sees something familiar that reminds us of that, which is a trigger, and we automatically go into that protection mode. And to me, it's like, hats off to the brainstem for always doing this job. Like, hats off to it, because that's something that we need. We just need to say, hey, look, put your guard down here. And you have to be in spaces, and it have to be with people that make you feel that way, because people are generally who we feel the safest around if we can feel safe with good relationships. If the relationships help us feel safe.
And that was hard for me. So when I found out and started to understand all the trauma I went through as a child, this is one thing I want you to talk about, because I'm not clear about this in terms of the neurosequential model, and I understand it. I was choosing unsafe people and unsafe situations. I was helping to create them because I was familiar with it. So I was keeping that cycle going a lot of the time. And once I understood what happened to me, how it affected me, going back to Dr. Perry's book, I could say, oh, that's why I choose those people. That's why I create that. So it's not just me reacting to something that happened to me. I'm literally helping to recreate it. It's familiar to me. I was just thinking about the situation where the therapist and your wife were talking about you, and you got a moment of, whoa, that's not fair. That's not what's supposed to happen. I would then go back and say, okay, when was it when you were a child that things weren't fair, where people made decisions, talked about you, discussed things and didn't get your input, didn't ask you for your input, left you out? Because that was a moment where you knew it might be unsafe what these two people were doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say, if I process like that moment for me would be after I was in the ninth grade when my neighbor died at my house, and from that moment on, I became an academic problem because, like, PTSD and ADHD, they have very similar symptoms, very similar. They have overlapping symptoms anyway. And so, like, I'm not sure if I was diagnosed. I mean, I wasn't diagnosed with anything at the time, but my ability to show up as a student was no longer there. Like, I wasn't processing this well. And so in class, I would probably be extremely dissociative in that space. And academic problems generally turn into behavior problems, right? And so then, teachers are speaking about you before you get to the next teacher. And then I went to 4 different high schools, and so I got kicked out of that school, so to speak. And mind you, when I was in the ninth grade, I was in like all advanced classes. I was in the highest level of classes that you could possibly be in my state at the time. And so once I left that school, then there's this story that follows you. You become like a school, how would I say?
You have a reputation. You have
Almost like you'd be like a felon, like your school track record like follows you.
yeah.
And so when people see you, they already have your file, they already have assumptions, they already come with, like they already think they know who you are. And, you become this problem that they have. And so the issue with that is then it becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy where
Right.
if you're going to make me a problem, I'm going to show you a problem.
I'll be a good problem. I'll be your best problem. I want to be the star problem.
Thanks. So, yeah, so I think that probably played into it, as well as like some things with my mom, how she processed things, how, things that were happening when I was in school, especially while those things were happening with me getting kicked out of schools and having to go to various schools. Well, it's one of those things where like the teacher's not lying on you, or like it's one of those, because I never was able to explain this. And part of why I wasn't able to explain it was because, and this is after processing, this is after therapy and everything, I felt very guilty for this guy dying at my house. Now, it wasn't my fault, but that's in a different part of the brain. Like the cognitive part, I could clearly tell you that I didn't kill him. But there was an emotional part that made me feel very responsible for him dying. Now, he had a 2-year-old at the time. I'm so glad my son just turned 3, right? Yeah, he had a 2-year-old boy. And his name is Connor. And Connor is now doing heart. He works he's at Ole Miss. He's like a brainiac little child, like brilliant. And so like at the time, he was literally the smartest kid I ever seen in my life. And so I would have these feelings of guilt of being responsible for that kid not growing up with his father, and for his mother and his dad. Like I carry so much of everybody else's grief with that as well, because it was my basketball goal. It was my dream. I have this. So here's a beautiful thing, and this is a question that haunted me from the time I was like 14 until maybe a year or two ago. Why would he come to my house to die? Like, we only played 2 games of 3-on-3. It was 2 days before Christmas. It was like, why would he? And I never met him. He was a lawyer at the time, even though he was my neighbor. He was my neighbor's son. So I never met him. I met his brother. I knew his brother, but I did not know him. So the first time I meet him, we played 2 games of 3-on-3, and he never goes back in the house. So my question has always been like, why would he come to my house to die? Like, and so the best answer that I've come up with and it always was far more of a question than an answer. It's like, so I could find meaning in it. Maybe he knew, like maybe his spirit knew, maybe he knows enough about like whose house this is, or he only knew spiritually, like this person right here will probably try to get to the
Want to
bottom
do
of
it in front of his family. You were
it.
safe. He didn't want to put them through it, even energetically, even if that's not conscious.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe there's a lot in there, and so like that question, probably haunted me for a long time. I would say it was more of a haunting than once I found meaning, and then the minute I was able to find like I have to make meaning of it. So like me having this conversation with you is part of making meaning of it. Like I've always honored him. His name is Craig. I've always like thought he was like one of the greatest people ever. He's my guardian angel. And how many people get a chance to meet their guardian angel? Like, let's be honest. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I met him right before he became that, right? And so these are all the types of narratives that I have to create and live with because the brain will create a lot of different scenarios. And I went through all of those prior to having any help. You know what I mean? Like mental health wasn't a thing when I was 14. Like there was no school counselor to talk to. There was nobody, it didn't happen in school. So nobody thought about it. My mom, my dad, none of them had any idea of how to help me process that. You know what I'm saying? And so like when I look at like the ACEs study and I check all the things off and I end up with the score that I get, this isn't on that. This particular incident doesn't even fall into the questions of what they ask. And I have a score for that anyway. But this one is the most impactful for me. And because I can remember a before and after, I remember what was functioning before, and I remember what stopped functioning. There was so many things that I could like basically have a before and after that incident. And so it's never been able, I've never been able to explain it. So like a lot of things that was probably a lot of people couldn't understand about me, about why I'm so smart but not performing in school. Why am I, why does he just wear basketball shorts everywhere? Why does he always play games and all of these things? But these were my self-regulating activities that I was doing and I had no idea what they were doing for me. But there's also an understanding that there's a before and after I play basketball, and I feel way better after than before.
That's right. And you brought up something that a lot of people don't understand. I do a lot of work with combat veterans, and for years, people kept saying it was on the battlefield, is what happened on the battlefield. I can't even imagine what happened on the battlefield. I'm not a combat veteran. And so we look for, and PTS was always talked about an incident like what you're talking about right now, this incident that happened. One of the things that I think Dr. Perry does so well is he talks about what I call the constant drip of trauma. So what's interesting is that it can be an incident like you described, or the battlefield. I'm very concerned too about the micro transgressions all day long in the childhood, like this
Yeah.
constant drip. I had that dad that no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. I had that dad who was always ready to explode. So I didn't even get a rest. It was a constant. And I try to tell the combat veterans about that as well, is it's not necessarily just that battle that you went through. It was all the moments leading up to that battle that was this constant pressure and stress and fear and sadness about what might happen. You do that for my childhood. It was constant. It was
Mm-hmm.
literally not one moment that I can do the before and after. It was just constant chaos, constant trauma of fear and sadness about what was going to happen next, and what was happening every minute of every day. So I got so used to my body being dysregulated, I thought it was its natural state. Because
Yeah.
I thought that's how I was. People say, oh, that's just the way I am. And I go, probably not.
No.
Probably not. Right. Oh, now I'm just gonna say we should at least check that out. Right. And so to me, that's what's so exciting about this as well, is that we can look at chronic, constant, what I call, the 3 C's, and looking at that. Speak to me about what you've experienced, not only yourself, but the young men that you coach. Do you see that as well? So that if it's not, because people say to me all the time, no, I didn't have any bad incidents. My childhood was great. Those people scare me the most. I just want to tell you that. Like they scare me the most because I'm gonna have to like possibly break through that and go, it's probably not that great all the time. But to know that there can be this constant pressure on us, and assault physically, emotionally, even a great parent that keeps saying, yeah, but, oh, that's really good, honey, but that's really good, but, oh, you did well, but, like that's just can be just as traumatic as someone blowing up and yelling at you for a moment. It can be more
Yeah.
so.
No, I definitely agree. And so the kids that I coach, that they're in at-risk environments. I don't call them at-risk kids, but they're in at-risk environments. They are like in environments filled with violence, environments filled with like poverty and things of that nature. Some of them parents have died. Some of them, are in single-parent homes for various reasons. There's, a lot of them have these ACEs, period, right?
First
And so
childhood experiences, adverse.
adverse
You can look
experiences.
it up, folks, at ACEs. Keep going.
So the reason I coached them and I sought them out when I started coaching, I eventually ended up playing college basketball. I got a GED. I dropped out of high school, but I did get a GED. I was able to play in college. I was able to do some very good things after I was able to get a second chance, so to speak. And I really resonate with the experience that they've had. Like I grew up in some impoverished environments. I grew up. My mom and my dad split before that incident. I have multiple siblings. I went to multiple different schools. My neighbor died in my house. I've seen people shot. I mean, I have the
And let's just
experience.
talk about racism. Let's just talk about, like, let's not, that gets me so mad in the clinical world that we don't say that right out. Sexism, racism, homophobia, that is also a trauma.
Well, I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, so like we saw it firsthand. I saw it firsthand. It was as
Life
you know
threatening.
as thick as you can feel the tension between
So
races. It's probably still extremely segregated, not by colored and white signs, but just by the overall like how they set everything up. And so it's very systematically disproportionate. And those things about the environments that I grew up in are to me very, very strategic. They're very politically driven, and I've seen all that again firsthand being from Mississippi. Sometimes I talk about it and I champion it. A lot of times I just like the symptoms are so widespread because of the racist institution of America, period. And so it's built on racism, and so racism permeates through all of its veins. And there's the microaggressions that you talk about, and I've learned those along the way a lot. The policing, just going to school. I luckily for me, Jackson is very, very segregated. So like the vast majority of my years in Jackson was spent mostly with majority black schools. I mean, I went to middle school and I never went to middle school with a white person at all. But when I did go to certain schools that I did go to, especially the ones that had the advanced classes, I experienced it immediately. So like my fifth grade, my first year getting into that program, it was like, yeah, that was my first experience with, being in a white controlled environment with the white people, even though growing up in Jackson, you're in a white controlled environment, even if you don't see white people. You know what I mean? It's very systematically driven in that way. And so being aware, my dad wasn't from Jackson, my mom is. And so my dad was able to point out various things that I could see, but I probably wouldn't if I just grew up and was only dealing with people that was from there. He wasn't from there, so he was able to point out some discrepancies that if you just lived there, you probably wouldn't notice. But after he taught me those things, I was able to you know, be aware. And awareness is a huge thing because it can just really help you and save you in so many spaces than when you're not aware. And so I appreciate my dad for being so abreast of the environment that was Jackson, Mississippi, for me to be able to navigate it.
I appreciate, and the reason why I bring it up is like, it's unfortunate that we don't bring that all of the context of everything into mental health, physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, and financial mental health, like financial health, I should say, all of it, those 5 areas. And the American Psychological Association 2 years ago, through social media, had to apologize. The American Psychological Association had to apologize for supporting systemic racism.
Yeah.
Just that's all they did, as far as I know. I'm not sure they've done much after that. But the point being is that it's real. It's a part of the context of trauma, and it needs to be constantly addressed and reminded, as does sexism, homophobia, any of that. So you've got family, you've got situational, your own personal situation, then you've got community, and then you have the greater community and global. Those are all parts of that, what happened to you.
Right.
And it deserves to be talked about all the time, or understood and put in context. And that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm not going to do this work without it. And
I appreciate it. It doesn't go away without people like you. Like, we can fight it till we blue in the face, and we've done it like for generations and generations. But if the people that are, are benefiting or gain some privilege from it don't stand up with us, then we don't make nearly the amount of progress as we should.
I agree. So we got a few minutes left, and I'm so grateful that I found you. I'm feeling so proud of myself for finding you. I actually, you found Dr. Perry, I found Dr. Perry, and then I found you. What, like, from this moment on, and I want to have you back. I want to talk to you more about this, and tell me what we deserve to do. I always say that. I never say people need therapy. I always say you deserve it. You deserve to create the person you want to be in the life you want to live. Everybody deserves to do that. Where does it go from here for you personally and for us? So you've got this wonderful understanding now. You have these practices. You used to go to basketball practice. There's yoga practice, medical practice, legal practice. I mean, you get good at what you practice. And so for me, it's not always changing my thoughts or my feelings. They keep coming and going. And then I do know that I change dramatically when I do different, when I practice different. So what can all of us do? What are you going to do with this? What can we do? What are some of the ways of being, I like to call it, that we can do now that we know about this model?
Absolutely. I think what you're doing with merging vets and players is like so huge, and I think it really aligns with what I'm doing because we just got the trademark for the phrase "shoot for a reason." Shoot for a reason was what we free throws for free therapy, and so what we do is a fundraiser called Free Throws for Free Therapy, where people that want to participate, they can shoot free throws. We got different formats where some people shoot free throws for a certain amount of time. We got formats where teams can shoot a certain amount of free throws, and like people that want to support it can pledge per free throw made. And so what we do is we take that and we try to get people started on their therapy journeys, because like that's what happened for me. That's how I got involved with. That's how I learned about Dr. Perry, and as I started doing the work and exercising with that and making headway with those things, because my basketball team, once we started implementing that, we were nominated by the Junior NBA for Program of the Year in our first year implementing the neurosequential model. That led to actually getting in the certification program, and so on scholarship. And so I feel like that the way my story started was like therapy, and it was my therapist at the time was very lenient with me as far as payment was concerned. So she was like, "Hey, look, we'll start before I mean, I had a torn ACL and my wife was pregnant. I couldn't overdo things, and so she was like, "Hey, we'll do it like this." And so like I'm like, okay, like that's a start. And so for people who would generally not be able to have the access to therapy, we want to do that, at least get them started. And you know, that's a big thing. We just got the trademarks was official on May 2nd, so Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're doing that. We're going to launch that in July, which is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're going to try to get as many people involved as possible, as many donors as possible. And
to help. I'm Gma. I'm the old grandma here. I want to help.
absolutely, absolutely.
I know some people that might have a little cachet that might be able to put some behind this.
Yes, man. I would love all the support we can get for this. It's been a very and the thing is, like, we want people to shoot, but we want them to give out their reasons. And so like it's a content generating thing too. So like the reason, like what's your reason for why you think mental health and help with mental health is so important? And then they say that, and then this is what they shoot for. So there's a direct intention and an immediate action towards it. So, and then we would like to, we want to incentivize all the shooters. We want to incentivize like all the donors, and so we got like a lot of things planned for the Shoot for a Reason deal, and then and we're gonna take that and we're gonna revamp like courts, basketball courts. We're going to try to put Dr. Perry's neurosequential model, and on various basketball courts and then across the nation, where even if people don't end up with therapy, they start to like see these images and start to see these different graphics that teach nervous system regulation, that teach brain regulation, that teaches you about processing trauma and somatic exercises. And we want to just plaster that over basketball courts across the nation. And we got some really huge plans on how to go about really doing what we think is next. And I do think if people had just a little bit of information and awareness, and here's the other thing, like that's for to get the people therapy and get the players and things of that nature. But the other thing is empowering coaches and empowering like trainers, because they, with a certain amount of knowledge and a certain amount of awareness of what they already have at their disposal, they can help a lot of people. And I think they're more impactful than therapists for the simple fact that they get far more exposure to kids and to athletes and to people that want to go to training. Because generally, if you have a trainer or a coach, you see them at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Right.
Most therapists you don't see at that level. And so the amount of exposure that you get, the amount of reinforcement and repetition that you get with a coach, a knowledgeable coach and a knowledgeable trainer, then that's huge. So like while we want to give people therapy, like if somebody started a therapy journey tomorrow, we still have to have supplemental things for them. An exercise program would be great. Getting them involved with sports would be great.
And you're doing something else. You're inspiring therapists. I mean, I just want to say, Dr. Perry said you don't need, in the book, What Happened to You, you don't need a therapist to heal. I loved when he said it. I actually read that to all my therapists at a clinical meeting. I said, just remember, they don't need us unless we're willing and able to do the work too.
Right.
Right. So one of the things that happened to me was I wasn't going to ask people to do things I'm not doing. So the medical model needs to change too. Like we don't get to tell them, oh, quit smoking, quit drinking, and lose 100 pounds. I get to go home and smoke a carton of cigarettes and drink a box of wine and eat a whole cheesecake myself. It doesn't work that way. So I really feel like you're doing two things. You're getting people into therapy. We need to get therapists more aware and more understanding and change the medical model and come up to the new work, the new understanding. One time, we did drill holes in people's heads to let the demons out. That was modern psychology. So it's good to know that we change slowly and that we hold on to our power differential and all of that. So I'm excited from my perspective to be able to say, you are absolutely on the right track. And there's a parallel track of people getting into therapy and therapists getting better trained and understanding and doing the work too.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think it's like you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic.
That's
So
right.
like And that's the whole goal, is to, like, if we can increase people's therapeutic capacity, then everybody doesn't have to go to therapy, so to speak. So like free therapy, it's not just traditional therapy. It might be like holistic therapy, or like getting involved with one of the coaches that we train. And so like our goal is to like create just a holistic way to go about it, and just create more therapeutic environments. So we don't have to go to therapy all the time. And, you know, I might have been to like maybe 5 or 6 sessions with my therapist. It wasn't that many, but it started. It was a catalyst to it. It gave me just enough information and enough awareness in the path that I needed to go on in order for me to be at this point where I am now. And you know, I made an intention to leave this space based on what I learned, and also based on what I've been able to see happen with other people who've gotten this information, or who have just been in the environments that I've been able to cultivate based on this knowledge.
And your practice. You practice this shit.
Every day.
I'm a licensed therapist, so I do tend to swear because I'm licensed. I can do that. So this idea that we all get to practice. And I'm so grateful you didn't say dunk for, what's it called? Shoot for a reason? Shoot what?
Shoot for a reason.
Shoot for a reason. I'm glad you didn't say dunk for a reason, because I am constitutionally incapable of dunking, but I can still shoot, right? Shoot for a reason. So I'm grateful.
We want as many people to get involved with it as possible, but it's also off the play on words. Like when you grow up in an environment that does have a lot of violence, a lot of people say, "Oh, they're getting shot for no reason," or people getting shot, they're shooting for no reason, and that's a phrase that you hear. And so I wanted to have a play on that. So it's an anti-violence and pro-mental health initiative that we hope that we generate a lot of attention and awareness, and also some support for people being able to get involved, at least start their mental health journey. And so however long that takes, however, whatever that is, but a fun way to do it, you know what I'm saying? A way to get a lot of people involved. See you happy, you want to get you some shots up too, and that's what we want.
Love it. I love it. I am so grateful we were able to do this. I want everybody to know that we had this planned a couple of days ago, but Martin did something very wonderful. He put his life first. He put his family, his wife's birthday, his child, he put things first and canceled on me. Made me like him even more. Because he said, I'm going to do that. That's what I got to do. I can do you later. This is what I got to focus on, families. I just want to tell you that did not escape me, that you made a conscious choice. That's what you were shooting for, like keep the family well first, right? And you're one of the most crazy well people I know. You're kind of crazy. So I love that, because this is Be Crazy Well. So we're going to do this again. Was this okay, what we did?
Love it. I love it. I appreciate it. I appreciate
Okay,
you.
great, because we're going to do it some more, and I'm all over this now. So we're going to bring you back in a couple of weeks, and we'll get on another call separate from the podcast, because I really do want to help. And I also want to make sure everything that you write, when we post this next Monday, that's when this is going to be posted, next Monday, and we'll probably post it several times. Make sure you put in any links, how people can get in touch with your new nonprofit and all of that, so that we can get it out there. Get it out there. Okay.
I really,
We're coming for you. That's going to be one of the places I can just feel it right now, that you deserve to be back there, and because they're still struggling down there. So we're going to have to come in and help out. So I'm all for it. Bless you, Martin, Ali, Sims, and I'm going to give you a link to get onto MVP. So you're going to get to see what we're doing there, and you're going to be my special guest. And I'm so excited for this new thing. Just call me Jima. I'm in.
thank you so much.
Everybody, you're welcome. All right, everybody, be crazy well. That means you have to practice. You have to practice to be well. That's how we all get well. Bless you, and we'll talk soon.